Board helps increase your accuracy with a compass, and the Nav Finder lets you track your location, even after making several direction changes on an irregular course. Besides the navigation dive, you'll use your compass during the night adventure dive, along with some other night diving equipment. In addition to the compass, for night diving you'll also want to have complete instrumentation, including a depth gauge and timer, or a computer. And it's a good idea to carry a whistle, so you can make yourself heard at the surface in the dark. A slate allows reliable communication with your buddy. A reference line from a boat or buoy makes night descents and ascents easier. And because it's easier to accidentally bump into things in the dark, even in warm water you may want to wear an exposure suit and gloves and booties to reduce the possibility of accidental cuts and scrapes. It's best to use equipment you're familiar and comfortable with when night diving. If you've got a new regulator, BCD, or some other new equipment, consider making a few day dives before diving with it at night. It practically goes without saying that for night diving, you need a dive light. In fact, you really want at least two, a primary and a backup, because even the best dive lights can fail, making it hard to find your buddy, read your gauges, or follow an ascent line. One or more backup lights minimizes the possibility of having to finish a night dive without a working light. There are a lot of dive lights to choose from. Look for these 6 features. First, look for a rugged outer case that stands up to a bit of abuse and salt water. Second, look for dependable switches, with a switch lock desirable to keep the light from turning on accidentally in your dive bag. Third, try to choose a light with as few O-ring sealed openings as possible to make maintenance easier. And fourth, be sure the light feels comfortable to you. Fifth, a wrist lanyard helps avoid loss. And sixth, be sure it has fresh batteries or freshly charged rechargeable batteries. Some divers prefer rechargeable batteries because they're cheaper to operate if you use the light a lot. Other divers prefer disposable battery lights because they don't cost as much initially. Remember that some of the brightest dive lights generate so much heat that they should only be turned on underwater. Turning them on above water may damage them. Follow the manufacturer's recommendations. You'll find some other lights useful. Use chemical or marker lights to mark buoys, lines, and you and your buddy. In clear water, suspend a submersible strobe beacon to help you navigate and find your way back to your dive float or boat. Be sure to rinse dive lights thoroughly with fresh water after diving, and to clean and lubricate the O-rings regularly. If you accidentally flood a dive light, drain the light as soon as possible. Throw away disposable batteries. Remove the O-rings and rinse the light inside and out with fresh water. Then drain the light and allow it to dry. Return the light to your dive store or the manufacturer for service before diving with it again. Since water absorbs color and light, you may want to take a dive light along on the deep adventure dive. Deep diving has other equipment considerations too. The scuba equipment you already use is probably fine for deep diving, but you want to ensure that it's in top shape. As you go deeper, the air you breathe becomes denser, so make sure your regulator's in top condition, has been maintained properly, and has been professionally serviced in the last year. Your submersible pressure gauge should be serviced and checked for accuracy, along with your regulator. As you remember from your open water diver course, the deeper you go, the faster you use your air. So on a deep dive, select an adequately large cylinder, which may be larger than what you may prefer on a shallower dive. Even with this much air, you'll want to keep a close eye on your submersible pressure gauge. Make sure your BCD and the low-pressure inflator are in good working condition, and as for all diving, that your alternate air source is clearly marked and secured in the triangle formed by your chin and the lower corners of your rib cage. It may be warm at shallow depths, but choose your exposure suit considering the temperature at depth. Deep dives may take you below a thermocline into significantly cooler water that requires more thermal protection. In some cases, you may want a self-contained ascent bottle or a pony bottle as an additional air source. And of course, you'll want a complete set of gauges or a dive computer. When deep diving with a computer, remember to stay within its no decompression limits and check your exposure with the RDP. You and your buddy should each have your own computer and end the dive based on the most conservative readings of either. If your computer fails, follow the manufacturer instructions. If you don't have them, make a normal ascent at 18 meters, 60 feet per minute, or the computer's rate if slower, and make a safety stop at 5 meters, 15 feet, perhaps as long as your air supply permits if you're close to a no-stop limit. Consult the manufacturer guidelines before diving again. You may have to wait 12 hours or more. Besides your regular equipment, some specialized equipment helps on a deep dive. For one, a reference line makes it easier to control ascents and descents. This can be an anchor or mooring line or a weighted shot line. An extra tank and regulator at 5 meters 15 feet provides air for a safety stop or emergency decompression stop if you or your buddy accidentally exceed your planned limits. And since you're more buoyant at the end of the dive, it helps to weight yourself so you're neutrally buoyant with a nearly empty tank. Even so, some easily accessible extra weights at the safety stop may help if you're a bit lighter than you planned. If you're not diving from a boat, you can use a surface support station for your reference line, emergency tank, and extra weights. It's a good idea to have emergency oxygen and first aid available for any diving activity, but they can be especially important for rendering aid when deep diving and in remote areas. Oxygen, as you recall from your open water diver course, is used for first aid for suspected decompression illness. Now, let's look at the navigation techniques you'll be using on your adventure dives. Proficient navigation reduces stress and unnecessary surface swims, makes dive planning more effective, helps you and your buddy stay together, and reduces your air consumption. What you learn can even help you navigate on land when hiking or camping. Since underwater navigation plays an important role on most dives, you might choose to make the underwater navigation adventure dive as one of your first dives. To navigate effectively underwater, you need to know two things in relation to your entry point and planned exit point: your travel direction and how far you've traveled. You can estimate distances with kick cycles, elapsed time, tank pressure, arm spans, and measured line or tape. A kick cycle is the distance you travel after completing one fin stroke with each leg. Swim at a normal pace and count each time either foot returns to the same place in the fin stroke. Your instructor will have you count kick cycles while swimming a known distance, which will tell you how much distance you cover in one cycle. You can also measure distance by timing yourself swimming at a steady pace. You don't have to count, but if you stop or pause, it throws off your measurements. Your instructor will also have you time yourself swimming a known distance so you can find out how far you travel per second. Especially when following a pattern like a square, you can measure distance based on your air consumption. To be accurate, your breathing rate and depth can't change much, however. Arm spans and measured line or tape are slow, but provide the most accuracy. Nature provides clues that help you navigate. This is called natural navigation and begins before you dive. Note the direction of waves, currents, or tide. Note the sun angle and see which way it casts shadows. And look for objects and formations. Check the bottom finder or charts if available to get a feel for the underwater topography. All of these can help you find your way. To reduce vertigo and stay oriented, descend facing the way you want to go, feet first, or at least with your head higher than your feet. When descending at night, use the same technique and be sure to turn your lights on first. If possible, descend along a reference line to help control your descent rate and minimize vertigo. During the deep adventure dive, use the same technique to stay oriented during a long descent. The reference line makes it easier to slow or stop your descent if you need to.